Good morning and welcome to Today y Mañana. I'm Alex Urpí and this is Xavier, and we are your hosts here. Today y Mañana presented by Emergent Financial Services, sponsored by Forward Adelante Business Alliance, and of course Sombrero's Mexican Cuisine and Cafe. We're glad to have you all here with us today for the second ever episode of our show. And today we're going to have a little conversation. At the beginning, we're going to talk a little bit about finance and retirement, because it came to our attention recently, and you can talk a little bit about this, Javier, and just so as we do research constantly at Emergent, we're always finding new information, and apparently a lot of people actually don't know too much about their retirement before they actually get there. And I think it was something like 70% of men and 89% of women couldn't pass, actually, as they were approaching retirement, couldn't even pass a basic financial literacy test. Correct. And so I always wonder, why do you think that is, or what are some of the important things that you think people are missing when we talk about retirement in these situations?
So first of all, I think, good morning, everyone. But one of the things that I think we have to think about, and one of the things I wanted to talk about in the show is a building block, right? So we'll go into, I think we want to focus on financial literacy, education, and I think the show, what we'd like to do is interact with people, but begin to educate. What are the things that one can do for their retirement, for financial planning, and because there's so much that's involved, and I was thinking about this the other day, right? So there was a game, I think it was over the weekend, a Clemson game, right, where Clemson UVA game, and UVA did just unbelievably well, right? They crushed Clemson. And at the beginning of the year, I was kind of complaining. I said, they're just not playing well, right? And when you think about it, Coach Bennett has a plan. He has a strategy. It's a defensive strategy. But that strategy has to be taught. I mean, every 4 years or every 3 years, there's somebody new coming into the team.
You can't just
you can't just jump in. Exactly. So it's something that has to be taught. It's something that has to be practiced, and then it's implemented. And it's really the same in financial world. In other words, you just don't get up, when you're 55 or 60 and say, okay, I'm ready for my retirement. What do I do? Well, by then, that whole game plan, it's like waiting for the last game, your championship game, and say, okay, we're going to play defense today. Well, it just doesn't work that way, right? So I think what's important is to begin to make people aware that there is something to do early on in their career or even early on in their childhood. And I tell this to parents all the time. Sometimes, grandma and grandpa, give $100 here or $200 for Christmas or whatever. Well, open up an account, begin a savings account, a brokerage account. Something where that money can begin to grow, right? And I think that's the key. The key is finding out ways that whether it's an individual or a small business, ways that one can save for the future. And if anything, 2020 has certainly shown us that saving for the future can also mean having some money for emergencies. And I think that there are some tools that people can use for that. And I'm sure you have a few up your sleeve, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, we all work with it all the time. Because I think people sometimes, it's really tempting, I think, when we're looking at retirement and saving your money and everything, to look at it as different buckets and say, well, if I want to save for retirement, I have to put money in this bucket, and if I want to save for an emergency, I have to put money in different, and it's different money, and I can't touch it, and if I do and put something from in the wrong bucket, then I've messed up my plan and everything. And in reality, let's face it, money is money. It crosses, when I give you a dollar bill, you can put it in one bucket, you can put it in the other one. It's the same dollar bill. It looks the same. It still has George Washington on it. It's all exactly the same. So really, the key when you're thinking about saving is really, what is my purpose for this money? And sometimes that's emergency fund, right? So you sit there. For those who don't know, emergency fund, that's really one of the big ones, I think, that we work with a lot of people on. It's important because if you're a single person, you really do want to build that 3 months worth of expenses and figure out, okay, can I really get that into a quick savings account or a Roth IRA or something where I can access that quickly in an emergency? And I think sometimes people get a little nervous about that. Say, well, if I'm doing that, am I not saving for retirement? Right? You don't have to look at it that way. That's part of it. Because if you never use that emergency fund, guess where it's going? in your
For
retirement.
Exactly.
You're going to be using it anyway. So that's one of the big ones, and I think people get confused sometimes by, I think, the complexity, that it looks complex. You shoot out all these names: IRA, 401k, SEP, Roth, and people are like, what are all these different names? Why do they have to be named different things? What does IRA even stand for? And so the key thing always just to remember is all these are different means by which you can save that affect your taxes in different ways.
Exactly.
Then the goal is always to pay as few taxes as possible on your retirement money, because it's going to drag it down. If you're earning 5% and every time you earn 5%, you're losing 10% of that, well,
or 20.
Or 20, over time, that 5% doesn't compound as quickly.
Exactly.
So you really want to the goal is always to figure out the combination of accounts that is going to work best for you. But always keep in mind, there's no plan that has to be super strict.
No, and plans, and let's face it, life has its surprises, right? And the reason you make a plan is so that you know that that plan is there, hopefully for the future, but it has to be revisited almost, continuously from a certain perspective, right? But at least constantly, so that you can say, if something happens in the market, something happened in you personal life, or you're in a small business, and small business is a perfect example, right? A lot of times the small businesses come in, the first few years, sometimes they're a struggle. They just don't have enough money, and when they get a little money, they want to pour it back into the business. And that makes perfect sense. But later on, once they get going, it's important to say, how much of that money do I want to be able to now put into a retirement plan of some form, right, for tomorrow, for mañana, right? Because in essence, what you're looking for is a situation where something happens to you or the business, there's at least something there for you to fall back on.
Yeah.
And then two, when you're ready to retire, the last thing you need is say, okay, I'm 70 years old, I'm ready to retire, and I want to sell my business. Well, how many people are looking to buy your business at top dollar when they know you're ready to retire, right? I mean, you can't sell your business when you're ready to retire, because everybody knows you are now desperate to sell, because that's going to be your retirement. Well, if you have a bucket already that is a retirement bucket, and you say, I can live off this, then you have the ability really to negotiate. So that's the key. It's really to build a plan and keep that plan up to date. Make sure that it's going in the right direction, and like for example, Social Security, right? I mean, it just.
How many people don't think about Social Security until the last minute? Like you're 60 and says, oh, now I should probably check.
Yeah, let me get my Social Security check now.
Yeah, let me
without
get it
thinking
now.
about.
Was some huge number. I think it was 40%, 20 to 40% of people get their Social Security at 62.
At 62.
As soon as possible.
Right.
And a lot of them, and granted, there's going to be some situations where
course.
you have no choice but to get your Social Security at 62. But so many people get it at 62 when they don't need to, but it's just the thought is, well, I don't want the government holding on to that money.
To my money, yes.
To my money. I paid for it. I want it now.
Right.
Not realizing how much that little bucket grows if you don't touch it till 65, how much you're getting penalized. The government is basically counting on you to take that at 62, because they're sitting there saying,
Absolutely.
I would love for you to take this at 62, because I'm going to pay you
much less.
boatloads less.
Well, it's
than I would
30%
pay
less
30%.
than what you would get at full retirement age, right? So think about it. So if you were supposed to get $1,000 on a monthly basis, right, when full retirement. And today, full retirement, if you're born after 1960, it's going to be 67 years old. Before that, it depends on your age. For example, 1955, which was the year I was born, it's 66 and 2 months, right? However, when you think about it, right, so if you take you're supposed to get $1,000, right, when you're full retirement. But if you take it at 62, you get $700. That's like $78,000 or $80,000
that's
over that
$300
time
less
period.
a month.
Absolutely.
Every
Absolutely.
single month.
And the other thing that's important that most people don't realize is that Social Security continues to grow up until you're 70 and a half years old, right? At 70 is when is the last moment you can take it. But it grows at 8% tax-free. So for those that have already a retirement plan that says, I can live off this plan for now, and if that plan is not earning 8% tax-free, then you can say, I won't take my Social Security right now. It's like an annuity, right? It's an annuity that the government is giving you. Say, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for it to grow to its maximum stage, and then I get it. Granted, as you said before, everybody's in a different situation. I mean, everybody, I think of I think of financial planning as people come to our offices, right? And they have all these puzzle pieces. They just come in and they throw them at us and they say, here, I mean, I want to make sure that when I retire, right, I have enough money so that I can live X amount of years, right? But all these pieces are different for everybody. Some people just love to go on vacation, but people say, nah, I don't want to go on vacation. I just want to have a comfortable, home and live at home and not worry about anything, right? So you have to put all these pieces together. But you and I know that those pieces don't obviously fit perfectly to create that, that perfect, puzzle.
There's no box.
Exactly.
That says this is what the puzzle piece needs to look like.
Yeah, there's no picture.
There's no picture.
Exactly.
At the end of the goal is to put the puzzle pieces together so that the picture looks good.
That's right.
At the end. So
that's right.
Okay, this actually looks like a beautiful set of chairs in front of a lake.
That's right.
At the end. But it doesn't come with any instructions on how to build it. So you have to navigate all the different pieces. But like you said, the key is that you have to start navigating early, because when you get there at the last minute and you're saying, all right, now I need to start thinking what I need to do to retire in 2 years.
It's late.
It's late. You
Very
cannot.
late.
It's funny, I always tell people, you could have the greatest financial advisor in the world. I could have a crystal ball that tells me exactly what stocks are going to do well and which ones will not. And I still will not be able to make up for the difference in time. If you come 5 years before retirement, I could sit there and say, well, I can get you the greatest portfolio out of any portfolio manager. I still won't be able to actually get you to retirement age. I won't be able to get you the right nest egg that you need. Whereas if you come and you start saving at 20, you could get something as low as 6% a year over the 40-year period, and your $6,000 a year for 8 years is going to turn into $750,000.
Exactly.
And 6% is not an enormous return. It's not, oh my goodness, my
right.
financial advisor is a genius.
Right. It's relatively conservative.
It's relatively conservative, but it's time, because time takes that 6%, and like Einstein said, compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe.
The eighth wonder of the world. Exactly. And it's true, and that's a study that we did. In other words, so we did the study that showed that if you invested from the age of 22 to 30, and you invested the maximum you could into an IRA at that point in time, which I think it was just $6,000, and that $6,000 were compounded over time, and it continued to grow at 6%, right? But after 30 years, you never invested again. You never put another penny.
You basically saved that $6,000 for 8 years, and then
for 8 years, exactly. That grows to over $740,000, right? However, if you do that from age 32 to 40, it drops to about $400,000. And when you look at the graph, it's just incredible. It's like Einstein said. When you look at the graph, what happens is eventually. So what does compounding mean? So in other words, you take $100, right, and you invest it in the market at 10%, right? So at the end of 1 year, you got $110. So you get the $10. That's the increase in your portfolio. You add it to your portfolio, 110, and then next year, now you grow it at another 10%, right? So now that $110 gives you $21, right? So you can see that $11. So basically, you can see how that portfolio continues to grow. The beauty is, by the time you get to that 20 or 25th year, that portfolio is huge. So in essence, you're not talking about $20 or $30. You're talking about thousands of dollars being reinvested and growing. And that's the key. So the earlier you start, the better it is. And so with all financial plans, that's the key. If you have the ability to really start from when you're young, when you're basically just starting in life. You got a new job, you're still not married, because once you get married, things happen. But once you do that, then what happens is you're able to save a little bit more, and that savings really is what kicks in later on, right? And again, there's in a financial plan, in a retirement plan, there's a number of issues that we need to talk about, right? But it's a start, and again, the key we're trying to do here is educate people and say, if there's anything you want to talk to us about, for example, if you have any ideas right now,
go ahead and share your ideas with us.
Share them, because the whole point here is to learn from you and you to learn from us, and we educate each other, because that's what this is all about.
Absolutely. So it's funny, that sort of segues beautifully to our first guest, because the one of the first things you have to even think about before you start going to retirement planning is, how do I even get my financial house in order now? Like, how do I start budgeting? How do I start? What are the like key financial preparedness tips that I need to have? And there really are few organizations, right, that I would say do that better than New Hill Development Corp. And so we're going to be joined here by Yolunda Harrell, who is the CEO and president of New Hill Development Corp. Hi, Yolunda.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing wonderful. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Oh, thanks for coming on. And so you're here with me and Xavier.
Hi, Yolanda. You can't see me, but I'm definitely here.
He can hear you.
Hi, Xavier.
Hi, how are you?
Good to hear you.
So Yolunda, we were just talking a little bit about, my father and I, about just things, retirement planning, how so many people don't even think about financial preparedness and planning until sometimes it's a little too late. They just we put it off. And so I just wanted to start with tell us a little bit about what New Hill Development Corp does. What are some the resources that you all have there that people may not know about and they probably should be thinking about?
Absolutely. Well, we partner with an organization called Operation Hope, and Bernard Whitsett is our financial well-being coach. And so essentially what we do is we work with individuals, anyone, we're open to working with any and everyone regarding making sure they have a good financial plan for themselves. So that could mean something as simple as a budget, or it could mean that there are, you have, good credit, but you don't necessarily know why you have good credit. So talking to understanding how to maintain your credit and what all can be done with that. If you are credit challenged, we can work with individuals to help them restore their credit and walk through a plan. One of the things we've been doing a lot lately, of course, with the pandemic and economic crisis, is really just trying to help people, pivot and just think about what can they do right now to survive. And then ultimately the goal is to then get them thinking about the future. We help folks with, planning on how to pay down debt, how to increase their savings, so that we can then turn them over and make recommendations to folks like you and your dad to do that more long-term strategic planning. But sometimes we just got to focus on the right now, but we want to always be planting that seed and thinking about the future, because no one probably saw this coming, right? This pandemic.
How could you?
And the question is how financially prepared were you, to be able to survive if you lost your job, if, if you had a business and you had to shutter your business or you had to close it down for a little while, or you're just not getting the right level of clientele coming through. Did you have a good solid plan in place so that you can go 6 months to a year without stressing and worrying about what you were going to do? So that's part of what we do. The other thing that we do as well is we launched last year our first-time homebuyers program, and that is, again, our goal is we're thinking about assets, we're thinking about wealth building, we're thinking about how individuals could potentially leverage that home later on if they need to. And so it's a HUD certified training. We offer it right now online, obviously for obvious reasons.
Naturally.
But yeah, and eventually, once and if everything ever gets back to normal, we'll have in-person classes. But with that particular training, what it does is it opens up the opportunity for down payment assistance, especially if an individual is at 80% area median income and or below, then they can qualify for a minimum of $10,000 in down payment assistance just by going through that 8-hour class. And so, that's part of what we offer. And as part of that class, we have guest speakers. We have we have a real estate agent. We have an inspector. We have someone that, talks about insurance. We have someone that talks about financing the home, so that way you're getting industry experts that are participating in that process so that they can answer those questions that any individual may have during that process.
You're getting that knowledge base, because it's funny, to so many people, I think I know when they come to us, a lot of people don't think of their home as part of their financial plan. Like, well, I live in my house. And we're like, yes, you live in your house.
That's
it's part of that beautiful
Sometimes
circle
the
of
biggest
all these
part.
things. Sometimes the biggest part of your house. So it's one of the like little, you don't want to call them errors, but like things that you have to sort of have that experience to and the knowledge to recognize. And so like one of the things I always wonder is as people come into New Hill and they go through these classes, what are like common, because we've been talking about it, several common mistakes or things that people don't think about but should. What would you say are like some of the common things that you'll see that people come into New Hill and they're like, I hadn't even thought of this, or I'm missing this piece of my financial plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, insurance. Thinking about life insurance. It's something, sometimes it's things that people don't want to talk about or don't want to think about. But at the end of the day, unless Jesus comes back and rapture us all, then we're gonna pass.
Yep, it's gonna happen whether you talk about it or not.
there needs to be a plan in place for that, and that doesn't leave the family that you leave behind burdened by having to come out of pocket for funeral expenses. And that's oftentimes something that folks think like, I can do that later. And it's like, well, no, you need to be thinking about that right now. And even if it's just a basic, simple plan, like think about that right now so that, God forbid anything happens, then you have some way to make sure that your loved ones are taken care of, or at least the base, they get some basics that may be taken care of, or at least just don't have the expense of the funeral to come out of pocket. So that's one thing. The other thing is thinking about like what type of savings they should be doing. A lot of times people say, well, I don't, once I get a particular job or once I start making a certain dollar amount, that's when I'm going to think about, putting a plan together. And it's like, no, you got to have a plan no matter what level you are at, because those are resources that need to be deployed in a certain way to ensure, sustainability, survivability, all sorts of ways that those resources can be thought through that can help make life simpler or better now or in the future. So that's one of the things. The other thing too, we do come across a lot of folks that don't have accounts, that they don't have a relationship with a banking institution. And so we walk with them. We always offer at least 3 options of banks that they can choose from, and generally try to share some that are closer to them wherever they live. And then there's been times where Bernard, he will actually go and walk with that individual down to the bank and just be with them, because they're sometimes it could be a matter of just your past relationship with the bank, right? That just didn't go well and people are fearful of going back. Or we do work with individuals that are refugees. And so they have never established a banking relationship in our community. And some are fearful because of language barriers. So, we're willing
to come from. I know a lot of Latinos, we come from countries where like the banking isn't
so much corruption there that they just don't feel like that's right.
Well, if it's the same in America, I'm not going to bother with a bank account. My pillow is a safer place. So it's sort of overcoming that and saying, your pillow may look safe, but your money there is not growing. It's just
right.
Sitting there.
Absolutely. And then just helping folks understand like debt to income and, why it's so important to get your debt down, and thinking about ways that you can do that, and helping people to really look at to think completely through that budget. Like there are things that we all do where we're frivolous with money, we're wasted, and we don't have to have that, Starbucks coffee every day. We just don't have to do that, right? And so it's a matter of helping sometimes folks to see like what's the difference between a need and a want, and helping them understand that, like, I know that may feel like a need, but that may really be a want. Yeah. So, and especially when we're thinking about like, well, what are your goals? And that's the biggest part is helping people to stop and think through, like, what are you trying to accomplish? And so then what does it cost to get to that place? Is it you're thinking about a college savings plan for your children. Have you started thinking about that yet? Is it that you're trying to buy a home, or you're trying to buy a piece of property, or you're trying to buy a car? One of the things that we've also discovered in working with individuals is that they don't understand that if they don't know what like their credit score is, that if they go into a car dealership, or someone just unfortunately are going to take advantage of your ignorance about your own financial situation. And so if they realize you don't know, then you may pay a higher interest rate on getting that vehicle, or even, buying that home than necessary, simply because you didn't understand what leverage you had. So it's just kind of really walking people through that process and helping them to understand that you got to know, like, even if it's bad, we still need to know about it, so that we can put a plan in place to deal with it, so that it's not going to always be bad. It's just bad right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're right. One of the things that people don't recognize is when you start a financial plan, the first and foremost thing that you look at is the expenses, right? Because if you continue to spend more than what you earn, you'll never be able to save, right? Because there's the money life, right? The money life is, first you have to earn the money. Then you spend, because if you're living by yourself, there's expenses, right? And then you begin to save, and then you invest. So investing is really almost like the last thing you do. So
Absolutely.
What you're doing is perfect, because you have to look at, what are you spending your money on, and is it something you really need? Because if you have these particular goals, whether it be your child's education, or buying a house, or buying a car, as you mentioned, in order to get there, you need to reduce these expenses, so that then you begin to save, and those savings then will get you to where your goals are, right? So it's important. It's a great job.
And one of the things too that oftentimes that people overlook is the benefits that their employer offers them. Sometimes folks don't realize, like, they've got some really good benefits. It could be their 401k, like how much that match is. Like, that's free money,
Absolutely.
So you put yours in, they're going to put theirs in, and that's free money. And later on, when you may need to borrow from your 401k plan, or that you can do that. Like, maybe you have an emergency, or maybe it's a business that you want to start. I mean, that was one of the things that my husband and I did when we were, like, starting our food truck. I just borrowed the money from my 401k. I'm like, well, I'll borrow it from myself and pay myself back.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's true. It's amazing how many people will come even to our office, and they'll have 3 retirement options that are being offered, and 2 of them have, like, free money. And I'll be sitting to say, so which ones are you doing? And he's like, oh, I didn't even know I had these. And I'm like, okay, well, we need to max out on these before you even start thinking about anything else.
Think about the return on that, right?
Yes.
So you put in $100, they put 100, that's 100% return right there. You just doubled your money. That's a great investment.
In 2 minutes. But it is about building. It's almost like we were saying before, Pop, about, you have to, with Tony Bennett and the Cavs, like, you have to build the plan, then you get better at it. And so maybe your defense is bad in the first game, but if you're not thinking about defense, your defense isn't going to get any better in the later games. So,
yes.
like, to sort of close it out, Yolunda, what would you say, because we're always about building habits and so we've talked about some, like, the mistakes. So on the flip side, what are some really good habits or tips that you all at New Hill like to inculcate in people?
Absolutely. So one of the things is that always be reviewing your plan, right? And looking at it to see, like, are you on track? Are you heading down the path that you really want to be going? Is there any room, any opportunity for, making additional payments? Is there any opportunity for making additional savings? And then thinking about, like, okay, so what other opportunities may exist that allows you to build wealth for yourself? Is there opportunity for, investment, or, if it's real estate investment, maybe it's not in this community, maybe it's in another community, that where, your money can go a little bit further, but just thinking differently, so that we're not just boxing ourselves into just the space that we're in. So many investors out there invest in other cities and other places, right? And they don't close off their opportunity. So just, encouraging folks to think about other opportunities. Also, encouraging people to to always be looking to increase their knowledge, to study, to, read different articles. Because, once you get to a place of, when, some people are are in a place of stability, but they're not growing necessarily,
Yep.
right? And so, but then you have people that are growing. And one of the things that we really ask and encourage is that they'll share their experiences with others, so that people can understand, like, oh, I can do that too, for those that may not be on that path yet, or that they can understand that this is doable, right?
Absolutely.
Those kinds of things. And then also be open to sharing vulnerabilities when you made mistakes, because not everybody grew up with an understanding about how money works and how to make it work for you.
Exactly.
And so some of us made missteps, right? Some of us missed out on opportunities. And so share that, so that way others can learn from it and see that, oh, but it doesn't have to be the end of the world.
You can come back from it. Oh, well, Yolunda, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Well, thank you. I look forward to actually seeing you in person.
That will be wonderful.
Sometime
Can't
in
wait.
the future.
Can't wait. Take care, Yolunda.
Have a good day, Yolanda.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that was great. Actually, those
That's
were
awesome.
good tips. That's exactly what we were talking about, right? Because, I mean, it's, as I mentioned, not everybody has this bundle of money to say, okay, I'm ready to invest, right? You have to start from scratch. You have to start from the genesis of investing is really, what you're earning and then what you're spending, and making sure that you're in line with what your goals are going to be, and make sure you begin to save for that, right?
Exactly.
So
And to not be discouraged by the fact that there's so many steps along the way.
Right.
Because you might be sitting there and saying, oh my goodness, I can only save $50 a month. I'm never going to be able to get to that $40,000, $50,000 that Xavier's talking about, where it starts doubling every 10 years and such. But it gets there.
It gets there. It's
You
just the little steps.
It may not look like that at the beginning, but it gets there.
That's right.
And as always, keep sending in those comments. Share with us, like Yolunda said, share with us things that you've gone through, successes you've had, maybe you did tips you got along the way, habits you've made, or sometimes if we've made mistakes, we've all done it. We've all
Absolutely.
missed a little step of the plan and had to sort of reroute. We all have our off days where the defense, we're playing San Francisco, and we're UVA, and the defense just isn't quite cutting it that day because we haven't practiced it enough. And so you get back out there the next day, you learn from your mistakes, and you're even better the next time around.
Right. That's all about planning is all about practicing, right? I mean, you got to keep at it. And as Yolanda says, you have to keep looking at what you've done and reviewing that plan and make sure that you're still on goal. It's like owning a business, right? I mean, every quarter you look at, did we accomplish what we wanted to accomplish? If no, why not? How do we get there? And what do we do in the next quarter? Because if you just wait for the year to go by and say, how did this year go by? You go, oops, oh, yes, we forgot X, Y, and Z. So it's good to make sure that you stay on top of that plan.
Claro que sí.
Oh, transitioning, beautiful.
Y como dice Yolanda, a veces, nosotros tenemos, episodios en nuestro pasado que, dice, bueno, yo no pienso de los bienes raíces como parte de mi plan.
Sí.
Yo no pienso de los bancos como parte de mi plan. Y es importante considerar todos como parte de nuestro plan para las finanzas.
No, es verdad. Es una cuestión de, como dijimos al principio, es una cuestión de educación. Porque sin duda mucha gente, y más bien los latinos, vienen aquí porque muchas veces están escapando algo, ¿no? Y vienen aquí solamente para poder trabajar, para vivir mejor desde donde estaban. Y no piensan de todo, ¿no? Y no saben suficiente para decir, esta es América, aquí se puede hacer muchas más cosas.
Sí.
Y tener una relación con el banco, tener una relación con alguien que vende propiedades, tener una relación con alguien que te ayuda con las finanzas. Eso es importante porque a medida que tú vas creciendo, a medida que tu familia va creciendo, es importante saber cuáles son las calificaciones de estas personas que me puedan ayudar a mí, ¿no? Y aquí tenemos con nosotros, esperamos a Johan Torres.
Un experto de los bienes
experto
raíces.
Es verdad, un experto de los impuestos. Johan es el dueño de GBS Financial Services y Johan también trabaja como un agente de bienes raíces o real estate, porque la verdad es que cuando yo digo bienes raíces, quizás porque yo era pequeño y bienes raíces, no sé, no me viene bien real estate, entiendo todo, pero bueno, supongo que la gente que escucha allá afuera, bienes raíces es precisamente real estate, así que, pero estamos orgullosos de tener a Johan con nosotros y buenos días, Johan.
Buenos días, ¿cómo están?
Bien, bien, ¿y ustedes?
Muy bien, agradecido de verdad con ustedes por invitarme aquí al programa.
Es un placer tenerlo porque sé que está lleno de información y queríamos saber también de su negocio, porque su negocio que se llama GBS Financial Services, quizás nos puede dar un poquito de qué clase de servicios ustedes ofrecen a la gente.
Por supuesto. Bueno, como les dije antes nada, muchísimas gracias. Me encanta que estén haciendo este programa para sobre todo incorporando a la comunidad hispana y haciendo esa conexión entre la comunidad hispana y la anglo, que pues me parece que es muy importante. Sí. Bueno, para hablar un poco de GBS, GBS nace justamente en una crisis, en la crisis del 2008, 2009, 2010.
No sabía.
Yo me quedo sin empleo, trabajaba en una fábrica de velas y mi esposa también, o sea, tuvimos un mal momento ahí, pero así es como nacen a veces los buenos proyectos.
Es verdad.
Así nace GBS, comienzo yo a buscar clientes, mi background o mi profesión, yo estudié en Venezuela contabilidad, me gradué de contador en Venezuela en el 2002 y pues por razones políticas y económicas y sociales, pues me tuve que venir de Venezuela aquí a Estados Unidos. Y como todos, pues comenzamos desde abajo. O sea, comencé trabajando de mesero y después poco a poco manager y así uno va pues creciendo aquí. Bueno, volviendo al tema de GBS, yo comienzo a buscar clientes y comienzo con un solo cliente y luego, que por cierto es una tienda hispana. Y con él comienzo y luego agarro 2 clientes, 3 clientes y la gente me comienza a recomendar.
Claro, así es.
Entonces, así es como comienza GBS. ¿Qué hacemos en GBS? Pues en GBS lo que hacemos es que ayudamos al cliente desde el inicio. O sea, si la persona quiere comenzar un negocio, nosotros le ayudamos a conseguir todas las licencias, ¿verdad? Lo registramos con el State Corporation Commission, con IRS, con Virginia. Si necesita sacar licencia de alcohol, si va a vender alcohol o tabaco, cualquier tipo o el departamento de salud, pues nosotros lo ayudamos a sacar todas esas licencias, dependiendo de lo que vaya a vender. Luego de eso ofrecemos también, por supuesto, la contabilidad. Si la gente quiere llevar su contabilidad, pues nosotros lo ayudamos. Lo ayudamos también con el pago de empleados o el payroll. Que muchas personas no están familiarizadas con eso, creen que nada más haciéndole un cheque al empleado ya está listo y no es así.
No.
Hay casos en que sí es así, o sea, hay veces que tienes un subcontratista por un proyecto y lo puedes hacer, pero por supuesto dando una 1099 a final de año. Pero si no, pues tienes que hacer un payroll. Si la persona es tu empleado, tienes que hacerle un payroll o un pago de nómina o un pago empleado, que pues nosotros podemos ayudar con eso. Luego de eso ofrecemos también el servicio de impuestos, o sea, hacemos los impuestos ya sea personales o de la misma compañía. ¿Qué otra cosa? Bueno, creo que eso encierra más la mayoría de lo que hace GBS. ¿Okay? También tengo la parte de bienes raíces que mencionaste, Xavier, y eso lo hice también porque mis clientes en el 2014, 2013, 2014, la gente me comenzó a preguntar si yo les podía ayudar a conseguir una casa o a comprar una casa o a comprar un local comercial. Y yo les decía que no, hasta que un día dije, bueno, pero quizás yo debería sacarme la licencia y comenzar a ayudar a la gente a comprar su casa o su local comercial. Y eso fue lo que hice. Así que en el 2015 tomé el examen y me convertí en agente de bienes raíces.
Perfecto, es interesante. Estamos hablando antes sobre las finanzas y planear las finanzas y es interesante oír a usted que ayuda a las personas en ese sentido desde el principio. Y yo no sabía, más bien lo conocí usted como alguien que hacía la contabilidad, pero no sabía que hacía desde el principio, ayudar a las compañías, crear la compañía y darles todas las información que necesita para naturalmente solamente no crecer, pero andar, ¿no? Y es importante tener a gente como usted que tiene esa clase de sabiduría para poder ayudar a personas. Y es lo que estamos hablando antes, de que es importante educar a las personas para que sepan qué es lo que necesitan para crecer, no sean individuales o sean unas compañías pequeñas, ¿no? Y me gustaría saber de usted, que usted sé que trabaja con muchas compañías pequeñas que son latinas. ¿Usted cree que muchas de estas compañías están preparadas para sus retiros o cree que también es una área que también necesita un poco más de ayuda o empujo, ¿no?
Sí, la mayoría de los clientes creo que necesitan más educación en cuanto a la parte de retiros. Yo varios clientes, pues como ustedes saben, se los he tratado de recomendar a ustedes, pero sí, en esa parte creo que les hace falta mucho más, creo que sí, hablarles más sobre eso, educarlos un poco más sobre eso. Yo me encargo mucho de educarlos en la parte de finanzas en cuanto a eso que ustedes están hablando de abrir cuentas bancarias. La mayoría de mis clientes hispanos al principio me llegan aquí sin cuenta de banco, no saben cómo usar una cuenta de banco, así que nosotros los educamos. Yo les digo, ustedes si abren su negocio, tienen que abrir su cuenta del negocio y todo lo que sea el negocio tiene que ir ahí, ya sea ingresos o gastos, para nosotros poder llevarles mejor la contabilidad y las finanzas pues estén más organizadas. Pero volviendo al tema de planes de retiro, sí, yo creo que es algo que deberíamos educarlos un poco más y me uno a ustedes si de alguna forma para ver cómo podemos lograr eso.
No, sería bueno quizás en alguna manera entrenar o hacer algún, ¿cómo se dice? Un brochure, ¿no? que explica un poquito las posibilidades, porque como usted dice, como decimos antes, el año pasado estoy seguro que para muchas compañías fue muy difícil y saber que tienen un poco de dinero así en un banco o en una cuenta que sea o que fuera para el retiro, lo pueden retirar para emergencias, es importante. Y bueno, yo creo que
es considerar todos como parte del plan, porque creo que muchas veces las personas creen en su negocio como parte de su plan, pero hay también la cuenta de ahorros para tiempos difíciles. Hay también la casa, que muchas personas, estamos hablando con Yolanda, que muchas personas aún en la comunidad angla no consideran su casa como parte de sus finanzas.
Correcto.
O parte de sus ahorros, que es el ahorro más grande que tiene. Es parte del dinero que uno tiene ahí, porque la casa es un dinero que uno tiene ahí, ¿me entiendes? Invertido. Es una inversión que naturalmente esperemos que crezca, ¿no? Que así cuando uno ya es un poco mayor y si quiere downsize, ¿no? Quiere comprar una casa aún más pequeña o mudarse, pues tiene un poco de dinero más, ¿no? Y seguramente, segundo, tiene que pensar que es un préstamo que el banco le da y tú estás pagando al banco ese préstamo, así que si la casa te costó $200,000 y te prestaron $180,000, al final, si no ha crecido la bolsa de real estate, en fin, tienes $200,000 porque los pagaste, así que es una inversión por la cual naturalmente tuviste que pagar un interés, pero viviste allí y invertiste en un real estate, ¿no?
And just to jump in, that's a great point Johan was just making about really just that even in the Latino community, like we were talking with Yolanda, there's a lot of people that don't think to open the bank accounts that they'll need to make those relationships with their business as well as their personal relationships. And that happens to a lot of to a lot of people.
Right.
Pero sí, eso es muy importante considerarlo y tener un plan para todo eso. O sea, a veces la casa es no solo un ahorro, es la inversión más grande en tu vida.
Más grande. Para mucha gente es la inversión más grande.
Sí, y así como ustedes mencionaron, ahorita con lo del problema de la pandemia, hubo varios de mis clientes que ellos, pues, por no tener un social en este momento, por distintas razones, pues ellos no pueden aplicar quizás para algunas ayudas, ¿entiendes? Entonces, esa es otra parte quizás para tener un buen ahorro o buscar maneras de ahorrar de otra forma. Otra cosa que quiero mencionar aquí en el programa, porque eso se trata esta es una ventana para que la gente sepa de los pequeños negocios que estamos y cómo podemos ayudar aquí los unos a los otros. Muchos de los clientes, muchos de la comunidad latina, tocando el tema del seguro social, pues muchos no tienen seguro social por alguna u otra razón. Entonces, yo lo que les quiero dejar saber es que si usted quiere abrir su negocio y no tiene un seguro social, usted lo puede hacer, ¿ok? Nosotros lo podemos ayudar. Usted se puede sacar un Tax ID, un número de Tax ID, con eso usted puede abrir su negocio y usted puede declarar impuestos. También, si usted quiere comprar una casa, usted también puede comprar una casa si no tiene un seguro social. Si la puede comprar en efectivo, pues no necesita, pero si quiere comprarla con un préstamo del banco, hay bancos que prestan, y yo le puedo conseguir esa información, hay bancos que le prestan a personas que no tienen seguro social. Claro, el down payment o la inicial es un poco más alta y el interés va a ser un poco más alto, pero he tenido clientes que lo han hecho porque quieren pagar algo que va a ser de ellos.
Eso es importante, gracias. Eso es
programa.
Es una información muy importante porque sin duda mucha gente no sabe eso y la idea de que pueden obtener un Tax ID para abrir una cuenta de banco, para abrir una compañía, para comprar una casa es muy importante que ellos lo sepan.
Y creo que con ustedes también, ¿no? Si quieren un plan de retiro pueden hacerlo también, si no estoy equivocado.
Sí, con Tax ID, sí.
Eso mismo.
Sí.
Correcto.
De retiro sí, para las compañías.
Muy importante que la gente sepa eso.
Eso mismo.
Oh, sí.
Bueno, otra pregunta simple. ¿Qué es lo que usted ve en 2021 para las bienes raíces, considerando que los intereses están tan bajos? ¿Cree que va a ser un buen año para eso?
En este momento mi respuesta sería sí, porque desde marzo que comenzó o que se comenzaron a cerrar todos los negocios por la cuestión del coronavirus, lo que es la venta de casas, bienes raíces, no ha parado. O sea que normalmente comienza en abril y es bastante movido hasta octubre, pero este año no paró. O sea, yo estuve vendiendo casas en diciembre. Ahorita en enero otra vez, o sea, no ha parado el mercado. Y por lo menos aquí en Charlottesville, el mercado, casas en Charlottesville no duran más de 2 días.
Mamma mía.
En el mercado.
Increíble.
No sabía eso, no lo sabía.
Y Rokersville, que normalmente dura un poco más también. Yo creo que en una semana ya se va la casa en Rokersville. Está durando muy poco.
¿Y quién está comprando todas estas casas? ¿De dónde vienen? ¿De apartamentos?
¿Del estado?
Por lo menos la mayoría de los clientes míos son latinos y casi todos son de aquí. Así que no te puedo decir si me imagino que sí hay gente comprando de otras partes, pero por lo menos en lo que a mí respecta, mis clientes, la mayoría son latinos y son de esta zona. Así que ellos la mayoría compran, pues sí, tratan de comprar aquí en Charlottesville, o los que no pueden porque Charlottesville está bastante costoso.
Sí.
Además de que no dura nada el inventario, se van a Rokersville o a Palmyra. Algunos si consiguen algo en Earlsville o Stannersville. Así que bueno, esas zonas pues se consiguen un poco más económicas las casas y no están tan lejos, así que la gente está optando por esas opciones.
Así que esa parte de la bolsa ha subido mucho.
Sí, correcto.
Es lo que esperamos, ¿no? En ese sentido, con los intereses tan bajos bueno, por lo menos nosotros creemos que los intereses van a seguir siendo bajos por un tiempo largo, así que esperemos que en ese sentido mucha más gente podrán comprar sus casitas que quieren casitas.
Sí, ahorita creo que estaba al 2%, o sea, he visto ido al 2, 2.5%.
Eso es increíble, es increíble. Sí. Yo digo a la gente, cuando mi esposa y yo compramos nuestra primera casa, el interés era 15.75. Es decir, pagamos más intereses que el principal los primeros 5 o 10 años. Era increíble. Naturalmente, los intereses en aquel tiempo de los bonos eran 13, 14, ¿no? Pero así todo, comprar esa casa con un interés de 15.75% era increíble. Pero bueno, así que 2%, 2.5% es muy bueno.
We're laughing here because my father was just saying, for those of you watching, when he and my mother purchased their first house, interest rates for the mortgage rate was like 15%. And now we're talking with Johan here, and we're talking 2.25%, and it's just, es increíble. Parece imposible si no hubiera ocurrido.
Sí, es verdad, es verdad. Es
correcto. Pero bueno, aquí también le quiero decir a la comunidad que estos momentos de crisis a veces son los mejores momentos para iniciar un negocio, que no tengan miedo. Aquí estamos nosotros para ayudarlos. Tratamos yo llamo GBS Financial Services porque tratamos de cubrir diferentes servicios y por eso, estamos aquí para ayudar en lo que sea en cuanto a su negocio. Y por supuesto, si quiere buscar una casa o un local comercial, los podemos ayudar.
Bueno, Johan, muchas gracias por su apoyo y la ayuda que usted hace para toda la gente, no solamente latina, para toda la gente. Y sin duda es muy importante que la gente sepa que después de una crisis, el sol también sale cada día. Y mañana es un día nuevo. Y si abres un negocio hoy, quizás es el mejor tiempo para abrir negocios, porque sin duda, quizás no mañana en el sentido de mañana, pero en los próximos meses todo empezará a ser mejor. Así que, como digo, gracias por venir, por atender, por darnos la luz y enseñarnos qué usted hace para los latinos.
No, gracias a ustedes por la oportunidad, gracias nuevamente por crear esta ventana para darnos a conocer a los pequeños negocios de aquí de Charlottesville, que a veces la gente no sabe que estamos aquí. Y buenísimo, ojalá que la próxima vez pueda estar ahí con ustedes presente.
Esperemos
que sí.
Sin duda.
Gracias, Johan. Siempre es un placer.
Gracias.
Adiós, recuerdos a todos, a la familia.
Igual.
All right. Well, that was great. Actually, it's interesting because we were talking about interest rates, right, and how interest rates have really dropped dramatically from when I first bought my house to where they are today, and interest rates are extremely low, right? And so you start thinking about there are two sides of low interest rates, right? For anybody that wants to save, for senior citizens, right, who used to be able to put their money in money market and say, okay, I've got 6 to 8% in my money market, I can live off that just about, right? That just doesn't exist anymore. So from the perspective of the saver, right, somebody who is saving or retiring and looking to, invest in something that isn't as risky as stocks, right? Exactly. It's a challenge. It's become very difficult. On the flip side, though, of course, anybody that's looking to borrow money, whether it be to buy a car, right, whether it be for to go back to school, whether it be to buy a house, interest rates are so low that it's an extremely opportunistic time, right? So you got to balance both. So when people come to us, we recognize that it depends on what they're looking for. If they're looking for an investment vehicle, there's got to be other options.
There's two sides to everything.
Absolutely.
Anytime, because you know what, you can go through periods where you say, well, this is a challenging period to save. And you say, well, that means there's an opportunistic period to borrow, to start things, to explore new concepts, right? And the same thing will happen. There are going to be times when you say, dang, borrowing cost me 15% to borrow a house back in the day, but there were other saving opportunities there. So it's about, in reality, it's not so much about just looking at one piece of the picture and saying, well, this piece of the puzzle is not fitting. it's in some ways it's saying, all right, that piece isn't fitting in this place. What other pieces do we have available to put there?
Exactly.
What other parts of the plan can we take advantage of in the current opportunity, even though it's looking like this, yeah, we wanted to use this part of the plan at this moment in time and it's not working out. What other opportunities are available? Because there's going to be some. Nothing is ever a zero-sum game where nothing works. There's always going to be an opportunity somewhere if there's a disadvantage in another area.
As you mentioned, if you want to build a business and you need to borrow, this is a great time to borrow. This is a great time to start a business to a certain respect because, things will get better. Right? I mean, after a crisis, I mean, that happened in 2008, 2009. There was a financial crisis and everybody thought it was the end of the world. And it wasn't. It was an opportunity for somebody to come in and say, all right, things are now looking better and there's these businesses that I can start. And it's the same thing here. Sadly, there's a lot of businesses that have gone bankrupt or are close to bankrupt, right? But that's just the way it is, right? So what can we do? What can those businesses do to either restart, right?
Or pivot,
or pivot, right? And do something else. And given that borrowing money is so cheap, it does give you the opportunity to do that, right? I mean, let's face it, even in the financial market, at this point, when you look at hedge fund managers, which I know a lot of people don't like, they're in seventh heaven because their borrowing costs are so small. So they can certainly leverage their portfolios a lot easier than they did back then. And sometimes that's an advantage even for investors. So the point is, again, there's advantages and disadvantages. We have to look, how do we take those disadvantages and turn them into an advantage? And that's part of what our job is.
And the resources are there. The resources are there to help. I mean, you got people like Yolunda at New Hill where they can help you. Really, we were talking about, that personal piece. They can help you get from that. You're sitting there saying, "Oh, things look bad." Well, they can help you get it better. They can help you look at it and get it better. And then, like Johan was saying, there is hope. This is a good time to start a business, and there are people like GBS Financial Services that are going to basically help you from the bottom up, from the ground up, to really build that business and get going. And then I'm even thinking back to what we were talking with Lucrecia and Bernardo just last time, that there's always hope. There's always, you start things today and you might not see it today, but your hope is for mañana, that it grows and you get to that great place, that you want to be at.
That's right. Exactly. Your goals will be achieved, right? It's just sometimes they take a little longer than you wanted them to, but if you keep at it, right, and you work hard, you'll get there. I have that faith you'll get there. And this was a perfect entry because next week, right, we're going to have with us Eddie Kay from Four Corners, and it's in real estate. And
Maestro of real estate.
Maestro of real estate. That's right. And I know he works both in retail and commercial. And it'll be great to tap his knowledge in this area.
Talk some more interest rates.
Exactly. Talk some more interest rates and see what he thinks about these low interest rates, how it's helping the real estate market in his business. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that one. I think, because he always has a great way of explaining things at EK. He's always got his ear to the ground on things that are going on and things that are happening in real estate market in Charlottesville. And I think we'll definitely be able to work through and sort of help you all and talk with everybody about just what interest rates mean. So sometimes we talk about this 15%, 2%, these numbers, and what does that actually mean for the process? How did we get to these low rates? What does that mean going forward? So we're going to cover a lot of those things. I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation next week. So definitely be sure to tune in with us next week. Let us know in the comment section. Comment to us. Let us know if you've got tips or stories that can really help others in their dreams to start a business, to save for the future.
Things that you want us to cover.
Yeah.
That are of interest to you. We'll make sure we do that.
Let us know what you'd like to see, and we will be sure to converse about it and talk about it in 2 languages. But until then, hasta mañana.